if we collect this and we can validate these signals, then the people that are in tune with these free signals, right, that in the time of need, they have the signal, and we helped in that process. We look at it that way.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 306. Can drones help in averting a TV frequency famine? For that question, we turn to Phil Larsen, Vice President of QForce, the Airborne Division of Q Communications. QComm is a professional engineering company that assists TV stations in converting analog to digital operations, ensuring compliance with transmission regulations governing signal strength and reach. This is all part of the FCC Repack program. QForce uses unmanned aerial vehicle technologies to provide efficient, accurate, and cost-effective measurement solutions. As the demand and opportunities for free digital TV services increase, the need for TV broadcasting stations to maintain FCC compliance will grow. Phil is one of the leading subject matter experts in vertical inspections by way of UAV in an RF environment. His career includes more than a decade of experience designing solutions and advising the telecommunications industry on the benefits of using UAVs. He previously worked for the DoD, NSA, CIA, Navy, and other government agencies globally, and brings with him an exceptional background and understanding of the safe, accurate, and overall benefits of UAS technology to the digital broadcast industry. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Phil introduces us to the Airborne Division of QComm, why measuring TV broadcast fields is important, and how drones can help TV stations and tower owners maintain FCC compliance efficiently and safely. But before we hear from Phil, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. So let's find out how drones can ensure that free digital TV frequencies are available to meet our growing demands with Phil Larsen of QForce. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Phil to introduce himself.
My name is Phil Larsen. I'm the Vice President of QForce, which is the Airborne Division of Q Communications.
Let's start with Q Communications, Phil. What does the company do?
Q Communications was started about 14, 15 years ago by two gentlemen that partnered up together to work in the spectrum arena, if you will. The gentleman that I directly report to is literally a rocket scientist. He's also a pilot, and they work particularly in the development of signals through the broadcast industry. That's primarily what QComm does.
So what is QForce?
So QForce Airborne was created about 3.5 years ago. At the time, I was working on developing some radio frequency collecting data tools that were actually attached to a drone that allowed us to fly at height and collect signals and patterns and different things. And we got in a discussion back then. Due to the delays in time and whatnot, we actually didn't put everything together until this last year, 2020, March to be exact. And we were able to come together, bring the technologies, bring our minds, and basically a focused business model and go after the telecommunication industry and broadcast industry and a few other industries that we could solution with our technology.
What type of services does the Airborne Division provide?
I'll start with the broadcast industry. We love that industry. It's a very small industry. It's packed with a lot of great people that have been around the block in a long process of delivering these free airwaves, from these big towers. So we started out doing what they call full comprehensive coverage verification via field coverage. It's a field study. This has been done historically by vehicles that have a 30-foot mast that's on the ground that are basically, drive around and they collect these signals. And then they use interpolated data to put stuff together, and they do a really good job. I mean, it's historically been working for many, many years. The benefit of what we were able to provide here at QForce, we bring that exact same type of data, except for it's non-interpolated, it's actual, it can be seen in real time. We actually, instead of stations having to hire a helicopter to do that work, the drone makes it just so much more simpler, but we're getting so many more measurements. We get so many more points of collection, and we're able to validate the installation of the antennas. We're able to validate the direction of that antenna, the power of those antennas, and the reach of those antennas out there. And we provide that in a full comprehensive report that inclusive of a KML file coverage map. VSOF is the terminology. It's a complete encompassing report that surrounds the actual station and everything that it's part of.
Now, I'm oversimplifying this, I'm sure, but is it sort of like a quality control type of service to make sure that the antenna was installed and functioning properly and that it's generating the right signal?
Absolutely. That's a great synopsis of it. And it's also the validation, right? It's the down tilt is correct, that the viewer area is actually getting the coverage that it's supposed to get. It's a huge tool to allow us to be able to get that signal out there, to validate that signal is there. Again, we look at it in a different way. It's one is that we're able to provide this service. We're the only ones in the United States that does this work. We're local, so that makes us really convenient. But the benefit of it is that we look at it, if we collect this and we can validate these signals, then the people that are in tune with these free signals, right? And I'm not talking about cable or DirecTV or anything like that. We're talking about the airwaves. That in the time of need, they have the signal, and we helped in that process. We look at it that way. Part of the other stuff we do for the same thing is the thermal imaging that goes in hand with a particular comprehensive coverage verification inspection, is that we actually validate the line set as well. So that line set is, piping hot. It's got lots and lots of power running through it. Some of these stations are a million megawatts, and they're just pumping out a lot of power. So obviously the breakdown is real on the componentry running that power. So we inspect that and we notify of any potentials, that might be a burnout is a technical term, or a nitrogen leak or a connection, it might be spitting out some power and they're losing power, stuff like that. But again, it all comes down to that validation with the whole system. And that's what we provide. And that's pretty much our big service that we provide to them.
I gave up cable TV years ago, and now I use free digital TV. But one station that used to be clear now comes through with a lot of pixelating. Now, sure, it could be my antenna or something on my end, but the service that QForce provides could be used by the station to validate the signal strength.
Absolutely. You're spot on. So the two parts of it, one is again, we do the pattern, which is up close and personal with the structure. And I don't mean like tight, it's meters and meters away, but we do that one first. So we know that the direction of that signal is going towards your home, for example, so we can validate that. And then our infield testing, again, would be in an area that's potentially exactly your area. And I'll explain that, is we'll test there as well to make sure the signal's coming there. If you were to call that station and say, hey, I'm not getting your signal, yada, 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 that constitutes a customer complaint in a sense, right? Or a customer needs attention. And when we go out to do these inspections, one of the things that we offer that nobody else in the world that does this, there's only a handful of companies that do this, is we like to work directly with our engineers and our station affiliates. And we'll say, okay, well, where is this issue happening? So I would actually come out to almost your front yard. And I'll put up a signal, I'll put up our drone there, we'll measure the signal, and then we can report back and say, hey, this customer that called in, he's not getting any signal, and here's why we think he's not getting any signal. And it kind of lets them get a deep dive into their customer base, which I think is hugely important, right? At the end of the day, that's how they support themselves, and obviously this is how you get your information. So at the end of the day is we feel good about doing these, what we call customer test point locations. And we'll go out and we'll do in those areas and validate or bring information back to where they can make better informed decisions.
What is the drone using to measure the signal strength?
We're using a proprietary software that was engineered in cooperation with an Australian company by the name of Six Arms. Fantastic group of gentlemen. We know them very, very well. Obviously, they're partners of ours. They run the same technology in Australia, but it's literally a proprietary software that is really, really fantastic. Basically takes the old clunky spectrum analyzers and makes it into a very sleek, modern looking little box that we marry up to the drone. It obviously has to communicate with the drone. It transmits back to our base station. And those reports that I've mentioned are instantly visible. We're able to do a preliminary report to our customers the day of the inspection. And then within 10 days, they'll have the full-blown report, part of our guarantee.
In addition to validating the signal strength, what other benefit is there to a station to having the system evaluated?
Right now, like the FCC is doing Repack, which is the populating all the new antennas and new line sets and getting this communication, this free public communication beefed up, right? And it's good. It's about time. They needed to do it for a long time, and they finally have that done. But now, because of that Repack, they're able to get that reimbursed by the FCC. So these stations that normally wouldn't be able to afford that per se, because these antennas and systems are very, very expensive, have the aid of the FCC to do that, which is a phenomenal program. We want to make sure we're doing our part. We offer 100% guarantee that you are going to get your reimbursement. If you don't get your reimbursement, there's no cost for the service. You get the report and we get the practice.
What drones do you use?
Oh, very good. This is my favorite part of the conversation. I tell you what. So we fly American-made airframes. Part of my past, as I worked for certain governmental agencies, we kind of shied away from foreign-made drones just for the security aspect of it. So we use only American-made airframes here at QForce, and one of the ones we use is by our manufacturer called BFD Systems to be exact. We're in tight with them. They're a very strong partner of ours. They produce the majority of our airframes, and we fly the SE-8, which is a octocopter. Very, 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 very stable airframe, very easy to work with, very responsive. We have it all dialed in, and they're proprietarily made for us. They're not off the shelf by any stretch. They have to be configured correctly. They have to have certain ports. They, obviously for this other technology to marry for the payloads, and then they are shielded without question. That's an understatement. They are shielded to handle the ability to fly in these high RF fields, which is a concern, right? Many years that we've been doing this is obviously those lessons learned on what the birds can and cannot do, like how many volts can the airframe take before it becomes a risk. And we fly literally at 1/4 of that percent of what the airframe can take. We don't push the envelopes. We don't have to. We have other means and methods that allow us to do the work without jeopardizing the airframe and or anybody around us or below us in those operations.
What type of missions are flown?
The SE-8 is our primary airframe that flies all of our PVs, which is our pattern verification stuff, which is around the structures, for example. So they're the ones that fly at 2,000, 2,500 AGL and lower, obviously. But they do the giant orbits. And then we have another airframe that we've just procured. It hasn't hit the market yet. We've ordered 8 of those for the coverage verification. They're a little smaller of an airframe that has the payload capability that we needed to have for multiple missions. This little airframe is really great. It actually runs on a tethered system that's actually mounted into our vans. And so it's quickly deployable, it collects the information and retractable, and then off to the next test point, which to do one of these sites is about 4 to 5 days, give or take, maybe less. It just depends on weather, obviously, as you know, in the drones. But that's an average for us. It takes us about that long to drive around that contour ring that these big towers put out their signal to. So we have to go around all those areas. And so it takes 2 or 3 days to do that driving. Our guys drive for an average of about 13 hours a day collecting these measurements.
In what ways is QForce different than other companies performing the same type of service?
QForce is much, much different because we offer more verticals attached to the original scope of work. We're not just collecting the measurements, we're also validating the line set as well. And we're doing, obviously our compound overview, we offer the video, and then we offer the routine maintenance programs. These routine maintenance programs encompass all the things I've spoke of so far in regards to the thermals and the PVs and the CVs and visual stuff. It also allows us to do a 3D model of the structure and then be able to validate whether if it's a self-supporter or monopole or guy anchor, the trueness of those and what's going on with them. And then we go back every 6 months to a year on those. And some customers are 6, some are a year. And we go back to those and then we do an overlay on those. We see what that structure's doing and how it all works out from year to year to year. And this has been really extremely beneficial. Now, that's what separates us from everybody else. The other companies do one thing. They only do the RF measurements and then they're on their way. And because they're not from the U.S., it's obviously hard to call them back to do just a quick validation of a point. right? We do that. We offer that up. We don't charge for that. Our crews are running around all over the place anyway, so it's nice for us to be able to say, yeah, we got you. We'll pull over here and we'll get it done for you. So that really separates us in at least in the workload. The other side of it is our pilots here at QForce go through a complete RF program. For one, that's a very intensive RF program. They learn about all the parts, the materials, the different type of ERPs or radiated power. They go through all of that. Then they also go through a first aid course because the guys work in these remote locations and, farm fields and tops of mountains and everything else. So injuries and animal bites and all these things are major concerns for us. And so they also go through a very intensive first aid course, fire suppression course in case the airframe has any issues. Obviously we want to be able to handle that. There's a hazmat course as well, and that deals with obviously hazmat of the batteries. Obviously, we fly the big batteries, the big lipos. So they go through all these different courses. Now, and we're the only ones that I know of, and I've been around the block a few times, and I've worked for a lot of great people out there, and there's a lot of great companies out there. But most of them don't go that far with their training. We do, just because at the end of the day is, again, these guys are at risk, and we want to make sure that they have enough worthwhile to recognize that that's a risk, or be able to handle that risk or treat that risk. We run a paramilitary program, literally a paramilitary. The only thing we're not doing is obviously shuttling a drone with armament on it. But everything is done through cadence. Everything is done through checklists. We look at these things this way in the fact that this is life and death in a lot of ways, not only for just the people, but for the company. So we can't afford to have any issues. In the current, we've had zero issues, notable issues anyway, that are outside of what we would call major, right? So at the end of the day, we believe that our program is far better than anybody else's. Our crews are very professional. It's yes or no, sir kind of stuff. They all look the same. And, we believe in that whole mentality. So that's what I think separates us the most.
If you don't mind me asking, Phil, what type of competition do you face in providing the services?
My only competition here is the ground-based guys who are running around in a truck with a 30-foot mast. The difference there is they only get 30 feet of elevation. We start at 0 on our measurements, and we end at 90 on most of our in-field measurements. So we get more information, literally hundreds and hundreds and thousands more data points, which in our book, and our customers seem to agree with this, is that the more information they can get, the better they are, especially in these remote locations. So only having a 30-foot height to us just seems like we're not doing our job effectively. So we go a little bit higher, and sometimes we've gone to 120 feet just to make sure that we're getting all the information.
Phil, can you give us an idea of some of the challenges involved in delivering this type of service?
Good question. There's quite a few, actually. Because of the nature of this work, Randy, I'll tell you, I make it sound easy. I do. It's not. It's very complexing. You're working around very tall structures, with guy wires and wildlife and terrain. It's very difficult to put it all together and get the guys there and make sure that they're safe and then the project's going to be done correctly. But at the end of the day, our biggest hurdles is just getting to the site and then making sure you can see at 360 degrees all the way around you, right? And be able to perform that work. Again, because that SE-8 is a very big bird, that coming out of the sky is just not an option, and it would be very, very dangerous if it were. So we take all the precautions with our manufacturer and on the fields to make sure that doesn't happen. So some of our biggest challenges are right there. Is just basic, UAV flying. You want to make sure you put it up and it comes back and it's safe and nobody gets hurt and nothing happens in the process. But when you start adding these big steel structures that that affect your GPSs if you don't handle that correctly, guy wires all over the place, different birds flying around, hawks and eagles who find our birds very interesting lately. We have to be very cognizant of all that stuff.
How heavy are the drones?
The SE-8 only runs about 18 pounds dry. When we lift off, we're no more than about 22, 23 pounds, depending on what payload we're running. If we're running the spectrum analyzing gear, we're about 22. And if we're running the A7 and the T3 gimbal setup, we're about 23. So not too heavy, not too bad. Very stable, though. It has an incredible wind gust rating on it. It has a wind gust rating up to 20 miles an hour. That's from the manufacturer. We've tested it at 20 to 25 miles an hour, and very little movement. The bird handled just beautifully throughout the whole testing. And we test all of our airframes, Randy. When I mean test them, they get tested. We test them in bad weather. We test them in high altitude and stability and longevity and battery life. And our fail-safe is at 30%. So anything past that, the mission's over regardless. And we never get past the 30% mark just because, again, it's not worth it. We'll figure out another way of doing it and do it more efficiently and safely. Any
major issues in complying with FAA regulations?
Good question. No, not really. So I worked with the FAA quite a bit in my past, especially as we went through the Exception 333 process and then into the 107. I was instrumental in being part of that, which is a blessing in my life. It was a lot of fun to meet with those gentlemen and work these things out. So no, we know these rules. We know what we need to be in and how to do it and stay legal, and we don't break them. That's just one thing we won't do. I don't hire cowboys. I won't put cowboys out there who will push the envelope even in the middle of nowhere and nobody will know. I'll know because I'll see the logs, but we don't do it. We don't push it for the most part. Like we've been asked to do several building towers in dense cities because of our tethered systems and because of our backgrounds and what type of safety processes we have in that and work directly with the FAA on those. So like the Freedom Tower, for one, that's one that we'll be performing here later in the year, which is unheard of, absolutely unheard of. But again, because of our record and where we've come from, the FAA has been astronomically accepting this proposal on doing this work. They've given us a lot of feedback, a lot of ideas. We've taken those and we've ran with them, obviously, and we're almost there. We're ready to get this thing finalized and go fly that Freedom Tower with a tethered drone.
And you provide the services nationwide.
Yeah, we're actually global. We do all of U.S. There's not one stitch of property that isn't in our wheelhouse of being able to go do. And then we'll be in Panama this year. We'll actually be in UK this year. And then we're tentatively starting at the end of Q4 or into Q1 of next year, we'll be in India.
Can you talk about the relationship you have with Q Communications, the parent company?
Q Communications, I can't speak highly enough of them. The owners is Tony and John. John Owens and Tony Zamalin are fantastic gentlemen. They've been incredibly beneficial to the program and to what we're doing, and they've allowed me to spend the money that I've needed to spend, in just the safety aspect, right? Just to get the right airframes, not cut the corners, or not scrimp on R&D when we needed to. They've given me a lot of financial backing, but they're also incredibly brilliant. So they bring a lot to the game as well. And we have leveraged some of their resources from behind their desks. We actually have one of them that works for us. He's one of our pilots. He's literally one of our big boy pilots flying around the PV stuff. That's the towers. We've been very beneficial to actually have people that are interested, that have the bandwidth and the know-how and ironically, the license. To start us off with, so they were easy to get implemented in, and we are ever growing. There's no question about that. We've already superseded our Q1 goal. We're still in January, and we plan on just continuing that pace on through the year. So we'll be hiring as many people as we can get per se. And again, our hiring process is we scrutinize that pretty well to make sure we get the right caliber. Our CRM is a major concern with our crew resource management and make sure we got good people, good character, positive attitudes that can work well with others on the road, things like that. So we're constantly doing that, and we need to be doing that. We have so much on our plates, which is great. It's a good problem to have. But we're also expanding into the telecom industry. We just finished a call today that will hopefully solidify that for thousands of inspections on towers. And so we're hoping that that wing of my division will actually grow on its own too. But again, we've had the ability to be able to pull this off. We have a brand new training facility built here in our Utah office. It's about 9,000 square feet of open space to fly in with offices and different things like that. So very, very beneficial company. They've given us the keys and let us run with it. It's really great.
Are you based out of Utah? Is that where the company is headquartered?
Q Communications out of Kansas, Missouri. I'm out of Utah. And so we have an Ohio office, a Kansas office, and a Utah office. And Utah is obviously the Airborne Division.
Are most of your pilots based in Utah, or are they distributed around the country?
They're all over. Yeah, they're all over the place. So we run a very interesting program. Our vehicles that are out there, we run very nice rigs that are, flat screens that pull down or already in. And workstations and, roll out decks and things like that. So these vehicles are always on the road, and we just rotate pilots and VOs to those vehicles. So once I approve a vehicle and its outfit and everything else, it goes out the door. And I generally don't see it again unless I go visit the crew in the field, which I'm doing this next week in Ohio. But it stays out there continually working between whatever scope of work, right, that they're doing. And it could be they're doing a thermal one day and they're doing a PV the next day, and then they might be doing a 3D model the following day.
What about the FCC? I mean, I rarely run into a drone company that has to comply with federal communication regulations. What are the challenges and opportunities?
The FCCs, they're awesome. They really are. They're doing a great job. I think they're catching up to the times. They're aware of the communication issues and making sure that these older structures are maintained better, that we got better equipment on them. Obviously, you can't have bigger, better equipment on an older, faultier tower. They're involved in everything. And we've been fortunate enough to work with them in regards to that. Again, that goes back to our routine maintenance program, where we're actually inspecting the structure and providing that report so that we can make sure these things stay in the air. But they're all on. They're on board. They work very well with us, and we work directly with them. We actually literally have calls with them every day, and they've been really good. Now that's unique to a lot of people. A lot of people don't worry about the FCC, like you said, especially drone companies. They wouldn't have any worry. But since we're flying around these signals and we're producing these reports, and our gear has to be calibrated to ensure accuracy, because our reports are actually being used to make bigger decisions. People are actually buy licenses for the space that they actually service. And so if our report shows that they're short of that license space, then the FCC can understand that the customer needs to turn up to get to what they paid for. But then again, if there's too high, then they need to turn down, right? So the FCC finds extreme value in exactly what we're doing, and especially in the quantity that we're doing it at. That's been the biggest thing that they've enjoyed, is the fact that instead of somebody just randomly calling for a coverage verification, we are aggressively chasing those and providing, obviously a lot of the incentives that we do and the different verticals that we do. And people are buying into that. And now they got more information than they're used to. So yeah, they're great to work with. And again, they're like any other governmental agency. You don't have to talk to them, but they've been really, really helpful for us, and we enjoy them.
Looking ahead, what are some of the plans for QForce?
QForce has a lot of plans. There's no question about that. Again, as I mentioned, our owners, they are very ideal gentlemen. They have a lot of ideas and around what the drones can do and what we need them to be doing here in not this year, but in 5 years from now. We are actively, aggressively chasing the public safety market. We have a lot of things in the hopper that we're doing in R&D right now that we find extremely beneficial. I'm a retired fire chief as well. And so we're chasing that vertical. We think that there's a lot of use cases for the drones to provide to firemen, especially on active fire grounds and car scenes, things like that. And so we're running that to ground. We're doing a lot of R&D there. And then we want to work with the Department of Energy and Transportation in regards to doing our parks, big giant parks, with a combined UAV system that allow us to find lost and stranded people in parks. And we're running those to ground as well, especially with our completely autonomous systems. And then we have an international business model that literally is complete autonomous drone operations that'll happen from anywhere in the world that we can control from here and be able to provide data back to particular industries, such as one is the farming industry. And one of the people we're working with there is Malaysia. And that's one of the things that we're actively focused on. But again, our bread and butter is our broadcast family. And so we're going to, keep solutioning them and inside and in the background. And that's what this facility we have out here for is it's actually designed to replicate some of those situations so that we can do that testing and start going to market with some of that stuff. So in 10 years from now, we fully plan on being one of the largest drone service providers in the world with very unique niche capabilities.
The service that QForce provides, as you describe it, sounds like a really high valued service. What's been the response or the adoption by the TV broadcasting industry?
Well, it's like any other industry, and you know this probably so well too, is you're introducing a new product, right? You're introducing a new service, a new technology. There's always questions around the technology, and then you're changing a culture, right? The historical means has always been, acceptable. It's worked. They've got what they need out of it. And it's not because they're ignorant. It's just they didn't know they can get more. And so it's always a unique conversation. And I love those conversations. I really do, Randy. When someone challenges me on that, I love to say, yes, you're right. That is good intel. But what if I could give you more? What if I can give you this? And they're usually like, oh, okay, that makes a difference. But I am getting a lot of great receipt on this. In fact, we have station engineers that we call champions for us. They're literally calling their buddies, 2 states over and saying, hey, you got to get these guys out to do your CV. This is great. I mean, you never seen anything like it. I have my report literally in a second as soon as that bird landed. I was able to make decisions that day, kind of a thing. Again, it's a conversation. Same thing that we, faced in the telecom industry is, why do I need a drone? I have a tower climber. Well, you're absolutely right. The drone will never replace a tower climber, but using a drone to actually look at the structure and do your pre-bids first or check for safety, make sure all your pegs are there, your safety climb cables there. All these things are attached correctly. These are all big benefits, but again, it's just changing a culture and getting them to see how technology can really advance what they're doing. And maybe if they're broad-minded enough, they can actually say, you know what, I can see this benefiting me in this way, and let's go this direction. And we get those sometimes too.
Now, the towers themselves have wires, pegs, and all kinds of physical elements that are part of the structure. How important are those things in your mission pre-planning? Do you consider all of those elements for each tower individually?
Very good question. So let me start it off this way. We're the only ones that think about it. I'm sure of it. Most drone companies, they've never climbed a tower, right? Any tower, telecommunication. And I'm not saying every one of them, but a lot of them don't, right? And especially a lot of the pilots. It's a different venue. It's a different vertical of a person. But if we're on site, we're looking at the safety componentry of it, regardless if we're asked to or not. It's just who we are. Coming from the telecom industry and being climbers, we get it. My chief pilot is a former tower climber. And so he's very, very anal about that. He wants to know that it's safe. And I'll give you a point in case. And then this is something I stand on a soapbox with, Randy, all the time. We had a broadcast tower technician fall to his death a few years back. And he was riding an elevator up to do, I'm not sure the scope of work exactly. I think it was a light bulb change or something very minor anyway, where some of these bigger towers have elevators in them. He got to a certain point and the trolley broke, right? And the gentleman fell to his death. Unfortunately, it's incredibly tragic. We take that very seriously because I look at it as if we were able to do that routine maintenance on that or go out and fly it and at least get a visual on it, that climber or somebody else with the experience of, around these structures could have said, hey man, there's a problem here. We should check that. That don't look right. Or that pin's missing, or that cable looks worn or torn, whatever. But I see it as a life safety for me. We look at everything that way. Not only when we're flying, but when we're on the customer sites, whether they ask us or not, we're looking at the structure. We're making sure the cross members are there. There's nothing dangling or free falling or whatever. But we look at it as part of our job, as a part of our mission while we're there. And if we can bring notability to those things, or if we could have developed a program that got in front of these things and saved one person's life, obviously we're never going to know that we did, but only by the fatalities going down in the industry, that would probably be a good indicator. But I'd rather see a reducing number than a funeral.
Changing topics. How did you end up at QForce?
That's a good question. So I thought I was going to retire, Randy. I have a pretty unique background. I've done some pretty cool things in my life that allowed me to get a couple retirements in place. And I was thinking that I was going to retire. I definitely didn't want to travel anymore. My last gig took me all over the world, 3 weeks out of the month. Great job. Loved it. I mean, I've seen, 29, 30 countries in my career. And I loved it, but it was hard. It was taxing. It was hard to be a father and a husband. So I decided that I was just going to let that go, which I did. My last day was March of 18. So I thought I was going to retire, and I was going to work locally if I took a job at all. And I did that. I hated it. And then out of the blue, from a 3.5-year-old conversation and things that I had with Tony Zumalin, he called me one day, just out of the blue. And he was still on my phone, and the name come up, and I immediately recognized it. And he says, "How you doing?" I said, "How you doing?" He says, "You ready to go to work?" And I says, "You have no idea how ready to go to work I am." Because I was bored to death, right? I missed it, and I missed the technology, and I'd stepped away from the technology a little bit. But he had just made a phone call, and we went right back at it, like we haven't skipped a step. And within 2 weeks, the first airframe was, being built.
And again, how long ago was that?
We first contacted each other 3.5 years ago when I was working the RF program for counterterrorism unit type stuff. We were trying to do some things. And once I was done with that, I had taken some of that mindset and technology and, that I had learned and built my own. And I was going to do the same thing I'm doing exactly right now. And Tony and I had, he'd got wind of it somehow. I can't remember, it was through a conference or something of that nature. And we had gotten talking about doing it. And he thought this would be incredibly beneficial for the broadcast industry. This would be great. We need to do this because the better information, the more reliability, yada, yada, yada. And I was all in on it. Our conversations dried up and I sold the technology. And then 3.5 years later, he calls me and says, all right, let's go. So we redid it all. And it wasn't hard to get back onto it. And of course, our partners with 6 Arms, again, Jason Schreiber down there is phenomenal RF engineer. He had been in the same timeline that I was producing his technology. And both of them are a little bit different in a few different ways, for sure. But we weren't directly competitors because he was in Australia and I was in the United States. Now we're tied up as one, and it's a pleasure to have him as a partner and a friend, and especially as a colleague as we go through this. And we're ever learning, and we grow off each other each day, and which is great. It's a phenomenal relationship, and I wouldn't change things the way things happen. I wouldn't change them for the world. Everything lined up really well so far. So that's kind of how we got all of us back together again from a 3.5 year conversation, because I was talking with Jason 3.5 years ago too. So it all came back full circle. And so we got on a phone call. It was like, oh, hey, Jason, how are you?
Can you describe your company's culture on teamwork?
Because the industry is so small, and because we're so invested in that industry and the people that are doing it, and especially the engineers, so they're the ones who've got to make all the big decisions and solve all the problems. We're so invested with them that everything just becomes a big team. And like I say, if we're not working for one of them, they're usually talking about us with somebody else, and vice versa, or sharing reports with each other.
In our conversation today, pilot training came up a few times. Is there anything that you'd like to add about training pilots to a new standard?
When it comes to training, I've built a lot of training curriculums in my day, and for tower industry, for UAVs, military, you name it. We've built a lot. And one of the things I did with QForce is I said, if I'm going to do this, if we're going to do this right, then we need to have a training program that supersedes anything out there. I'm not just talking about in the UAV industry. I'm talking about period. The leadership piece of it, the first aids, and all these different things that we've encompassed into these individuals to give us a very, very unique pilot, right? And a VO. And our VOs are obviously, inspiring pilots. And everyone starts at a certain area because of the way this technology works. Even though I've made it simplified enough to where Randy, I could probably give you the instruction manual and the airframe, and you could probably pull it off. That's how simplified we've made it without knowing what it was you're doing. There's a lot more entrenched into it, and our pilots know that information. They're not checking boxes by any stretch. And like I say, if your only flight experience is a DJI airframe, you're not considered a pilot with us. That's where our bar is. Our bar is much, much, much higher, because I need you to be able to handle, the big SE-8 or the Eagle, American Eagle. You got to be able to handle these airframes because they're not the DJIs, and DJI is a very good platform. They have, some really good products, but they're very simplified, right? They're for the end user, where our birds are for a specific reason. And so they require a better pilot. And so not only do they get all of that additional training I just mentioned, but then they also have to be very familiar with the software that we run, the OSs. So that's mission planners and other things like that, and be very fluent in them, not just know how to go to a screen and turn it on, but be fluent. So I think that we've raised the bar when it comes to pilots. And my statement is that I do with all my new pilots is I'm not giving you a job. I'm giving you a career. And I mean that. I literally do. Because I think when you leave our program, regardless of, the RF side of the house, you're going somewhere else as a much, much more qualified individual, much more informed and more knowledgeable about the airframes than you were when you came in. That's for sure. So you'll be desirable in my book. And so after building all these programs and going through all that, I built a program that was better than what I've seen or built in my past. We believe that our pilots and the people that are working in this environment are the best in the industry right now.
What has the last 3.5 years taught you about the business and about the drone industry?
I've learned a lot, Randy, over the last well, the last decade, to be honest with you, but the last 3.5 years have been exceptional. When I was in drones, nobody was in drones. And that's literally no lie. I mean, we started out with a very small handbook, very small book with all the manufacturers and payloads that were available. When I left my last gig, it was 12 servers deep of information, right? So the industry has grown. I think it's gone up to 127 or some billion this year from 5 billion when I started, or maybe to hair less. So I've learned a ton over that time. But what I've learned is two things. One is that there's always a UAV case. There's always something a UAV can do for us. That's one. I've learned that all the time. The second is it's not because we can. Oftentimes we also stop and think of whether or not we should. And I see a lot of companies that will get involved and get a lot of money and develop some things. And whether or not they should have is the question. I think what I've taken away from the last 3.5 years is that it's good that we're all inspiring to make better and bigger changes. But a lot of times some of us should need to slow down a little bit and think about what it is we're trying to do really and how it's going to help people. So at the end of the 3.5 years, I would say that this is an incredible industry that has incredible abilities to be phenomenal for many, many years to come as the leading, most advanced growing industry in the world. But at the same time, we have to also be careful in how we use that technology and make sure that it's used for the better good and things.
And for my last question, Phil, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
The drone industry yields exceptional promise. It brings aid where aid was never even a consideration. It has the ability to change lives in so many different ways and save lives in so many different ways. I would leave it with that we should keep trudging forward aggressively, actively, finding all those use cases, running them to ground as best we can, but always keeping in the better good of the service, of what the technology is actually can do for us and what it should be doing for us and not what it shouldn't be doing for us, and then how they're used correctly and for the betterment of humanity. I think that's where I'd leave that.
That's it for episode 306 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Phil Larsen of QForce and learning how drones are used by television broadcasting stations to comply with federal communication regulations. I want to thank Phil for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about QForce or want to connect with Phil, check out the website at qcomm.one.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.